Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. You may be wondering, why does Rocky keep having exit planners on the show? It's because exit planners know what a great business looks like. And I want you to have a great business regardless of your plans to sell. What they talk about takes years to build, and it usually creates a business owner instead of an overworked business operator. That's what I want for you. A business you love, where you only do what you love, and everyone knows how to handle the fires without you. If that's your dream, you're in the right place. That's why I have on today Adam Coffey. He's president and CEO, best-selling author, and acclaimed guest speaker who is known for building high-performance cultures and driving transformative growth. Currently, he leads CoolSys, a commercial refrigeration and HVAC service company. During his 4-year tenure, CoolSys has increased revenues by 239% and Ebitda by 376%, while growing to more than 3,000 employees. In April 2019, he led the company through a private equity sale. He is a licensed general contractor, pilot, former GE executive, alumnus of the UCLA Anderson Executive Program, veteran of the U.S. Army, husband, father of 3, and lives in Westlake, Texas. Let's meet him. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Adam Coffey. It's great to have you join us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on, and hello to all your listeners.
I'm excited for the conversation. Can you share a little bit about your business experiences and what you do now?
Sure, absolutely. When I meet people for the first time, I always tell them there's 4 things about my background real quick. 1, I'm a veteran, U.S. Army. Military taught me something about discipline, teamwork, and leadership. And although I didn't know it at the time, very valuable skills to have as an entrepreneur or a business leader. Number 2, engineering background kind of makes me a meticulous planner. If you ask my wife, she would tell you I'm an anal retentive strategic planner, always a plan, never live life without a plan. We have to adjust to things like COVID, but the reality is I'm guilty as charged. A lot of strategic planning. I blame engineering for that. Number 3, General Electric. GE is who taught me how to run a business. I was there during the Jack Welch era, spent a decade, first as an engineer, crossed over into business. Went to the GE Crotonville Leadership Academy experience, and really it was the heyday. It was the Camelot era of GE. Stock was splitting every 2.5 years. Jack was in his prime. and it was a special place to be. And so GE taught me how to run a business. And then fourth, experience. I've been a CEO for over 20 years, 3 different national service companies that I've built. And, I've made every mistake a guy can make. When you start off as a CEO in your late 30s, 57-year-old, guy now, still looking out the eyes of a 20-something-year-old, but there's an old Gomer looking back at me. So experience also has certainly contributed. And essentially, I've spent the last 20 years building businesses for private equity, different hold periods, different investor groups, on the journey to evolve these 3 big companies. And over the course of that experience, I've bought and sold over 100 companies.
So you've got quite a bit of experience to share and a lot of wisdom. Out of curiosity, what were some of the main principles you learned about running a business at GE?
So, a lot of the interesting concepts that I think have been talked about tons in the business world, kind of the whole thing about ABC players and forcing yourself to turn over those who are underachievers. I think it's always a difficult place for leaders to be when you have to make a change in a specific leadership position and you hesitate and you ride a person who just isn't getting the job done because they're a nice guy or a nice lady, and it's difficult. So, some concepts like that. Jack and GE back in that era always had the need to be first, second, or third in an industry, or working, very diligently to become that. In other words, you want to be a market leader, you want to be an industry leader. And so some facets, and I would even say strategic planning, GE, certainly I blamed engineering, but it was engineering. And it was also GE who taught me the importance of really knowing your business. If you're a young general manager walking around and you're being quizzed by people, I could go into my satchel and pull out, here's my strategic plan. Here's the 17 national metrics, for metrics for the business that I'm running today. And here's how I compare, call it to my other, compadres who are running, competitive businesses. So it was always the being prepared, having a plan, constantly challenging convention on who were in the key leadership roles. And then the concept of building an industry leader and a powerhouse. Those are some of those dynamics, I think, that I think about at GE.
So I think for the small business owner, they struggle with a couple of things. Number one, they want A players, but they can't afford them. And so that becomes a struggle for the small business owner. I don't know if you have advice for them, because that's something I'm constantly hearing. And now with COVID, trying to get labor, period, has become extremely difficult.
It sure has. And, you don't have to look any further than the evening news every day to see supply chain disruptions, not enough employees in the pool anymore. And then just the wage inflation of people competing for the limited talent and having to pay a lot more money to get that. So from my perspective, big or small aren't really the key characteristics that employees are looking for. I try to be an authentic leader, military, lead from the trenches. I'm a servant leader. One of the things that I've learned in 35 years of running, working in service businesses, 20 years of building them, is that if a company can't store its product in a box and put it on a shelf, your product is really people. And if your product is people, then culture is everything. So I try to be a transparent leader. I try to be engaging. My focus is not on revenue and it's not on earnings. It's on culture. Get an engaged workforce. Engaged workforce takes care of customers. Customers give us more stuff. Revenue rains from the sky. So I would tell you that I think a secret for an entrepreneur running a small business, it's not just about money. It's about the story. It's about, how is your business impacting society? What's great about the environment and culture that you have, that you're building at this business? And I think today's workers are much more tuned into those types of things and not so much as focused on what name is on the business card. At least that's been my experience. So if you have a strong culture, you attract top talent. And you do have to pay fair market prices, of course, or at least be competitive. But I think today's workers are a lot more sophisticated than they used to be, potentially. And they care very much about what a company thinks, what it believes, what its core values are. And if you're transparent and those elements come across in an interview, I think you can level any playing field.
Do most small companies take the time to build the culture and create their core values and make sure that they're instilled across the board?
I think good ones do. I think that oftentimes it's not necessarily done on purpose or with intent, but for a small entrepreneur, sometimes those who are engaging and good at it may be doing that, communicating that, instilling that without actually even consciously making an effort to do so. I just pointed out because from a listener perspective, boy, if you just sit down and think for a minute, why are you there? What do you believe? And do your employees know that? And does it resonate with them? And, today's world's moving really fast and there is so much information out there for people. And there's so many different ways that an employee can check you out as an employer, by going online and looking at reputations and what have you, that I just think engaging authentic, transparent leaders really can shine in today's environment. And so maybe that's something for people to think about is, are they doing it overtly or are they very conscious and doing that in an interview process?
And that's why we talk about hiring to your culture. You can't hire to your culture if you don't explain it to others and make sure that it's a good fit. And that's one of the biggest problems I think people get is they find people and it's not a good cultural fit. And if you know,
and that's why it goes wrong 6 months down the road and leads to quick turnover, which is very expensive.
It is. Turnover is very expensive. And that's why I think putting the time, that's the biggest thing. You got to put the time in up front. And I think that's where people struggle. They don't put all of the time in up front. They're too busy trying to generate sales and take the different hats of running the business. You said that you've made a lot of mistakes. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see business owners making?
So I try to cover a lot of this in the book. And for entrepreneurs who build businesses, put their life's work, blood, sweat, and tears into these companies, they become experts. They become truly experts in running their business. They know it better than anyone else on the planet. And there's a false sense of security that they're an expert then in all things. And oftentimes for an entrepreneur, when it comes time to exit a business or they're thinking about exiting a business, they think that their expertise in building a business translates to they're then an expert in selling the business. And so I see a lot of people making basic rookie type mistakes when it comes to preparing a business for sale or not preparing at all. And then also in the actual process of selling it itself. And so, like all things that we do, I think we get better with experience. We get better with repetition. So I tried to take 20 years of CEO cliff notes on doing, over 100 purchases and sales of businesses and try to help entrepreneurs look at the upcoming transaction, start planning for it 3 years in advance, start working towards that, all with the goal of obtaining maximum value, but not just monetarily, also making sure that they're finding the right exit path and the right fit. So I see a lot of entrepreneurs mistaking their own expertise in their business as translating to expertise in other areas where they're still novices.
And that makes total sense. I always tell people, regardless of whether you want to sell your business, have your business saleable, because that means it's operationalized extremely well, that everything is humming along, and that the processes are in place, that they don't need you necessarily anymore. And that makes for a well-oiled machine. And so regardless of whether they do or don't want to sell at the moment, going through that process, I think, is quite enlightening. And
I think it is. I think it is too. And actually then the business runs better, performs better, and it kind of reaches its maximum potential prior to ever considering a sale. You and I were joking off camera, off microphone. It's almost like buying and selling a house. I always joke with people, when does my house look the best? Looks the best when I'm putting it on the market, because I've spent all this time preparing it. If I'd have put all that time in a few years earlier, I would have enjoyed living there a whole heck of a lot more. And the same can be true with running and building a business. If you're prepared to sell, you're probably running a better business that looks better, shows better, earns more, and is ultimately transferable to worth more in a transaction.
That is very, very true. So you also talk about building an advisory team. Who should be on your advisory team?
So this goes right back to the misconception that because I'm an expert at my business, I'm therefore an expert at selling a business. And I talk about the need for competent help. And I talk about some of the classic pitfalls that I see people make personally, in this experience of buying and selling 100 businesses. And I can tell you, I literally have seen it cost entrepreneurs millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars when they get this part wrong. So, the universe of buyers, when you are interacting with them as a potential seller of a business, are very sophisticated and oftentimes are doing this, especially if it's an institutional, shareholder, a strategic buyer, a financial buyer, somebody who does this all the time. You can give off telltales very quickly. I typically know within 5-10 minutes when I'm dealing with an entrepreneur and their team, whether they're experienced, competent, and know what they're doing. And literally changing 4 or 5 words in a purchase agreement, if a buyer was nefarious, could make the difference in millions of dollars in trailing liabilities somewhere down the road. And so oftentimes what I see entrepreneurs doing is, hey, I have a relationship with this person. They've been helping me for years. Maybe they're a lawyer, maybe they're an accountant, whatever, tax advisor. And therefore they've grown with me. They know me. I have loyalty with them, a history. I am going to translate that and they're going to help me sell the business. Those people mean well, licensed, competent, but they don't practice specialty areas that are encountered when selling a business. And oftentimes their inexperience in buying and selling businesses translates to a poorer outcome. And it may not be monetary. It may be in the terms and conditions of a contract that ultimately gets signed. I always like to use the analogy of medicine because everybody gets this. If you're diagnosed with a brain tumor and you need brain surgery, you don't go to your dentist and you don't go to your general, your general practitioner who takes care of you when you have a cold, because you all want the best brain surgeon you can find. So you seek out specialty help to get your brain surgery done. Everybody gets that concept in medicine. It seems to be a very difficult concept for people to get when it comes to business and to selling a business. It's a specialty area of practice. There's a lot of preparation work that needs to be done. Buyers want to see 3 years worth of adjusted, normalized financial statements. You have to do tax planning, that this is going to be a big windfall. What happens to you with the money when you receive it? Where do you live? How are you taxed? What's that look like? What's the structure of the deal? All these things important. Legally, your attorney who's been your friend who happens to help you with an occasional slip and fall or a wrongful termination claim or, a petty litigation from here or there, or staying, qualified to do business in a certain market, may be a great person, but this is a specialty area of practice. There are lawyers who spend all day, every day doing nothing but transaction type contracts. And it's important you have competent advice. So in the book, we try to help people identify, look, you need an accountant to help you prepare the business financial records for sale. Can't keep paying Uncle Jimmy anymore. And you can't have the lake house in your finances and, your little airplane you bought, every trip becomes a business trip. You want to normalize, adjust, get your finances in order. If you own real estate, you're going to need to spin that out because no buyer wants to own your real estate. And then, as you're preparing the business for sale, you're also going to need the accountant on the personal or the accountant on the business side, tax planning on the personal side, the lawyer, and then finally the investment banker. Everyone knows the concept. You sell a house, you hire a realtor. You use a realtor, and there's often two realtors involved. One representing a buyer, one representing a seller. That are a part of negotiation. Well, I can let you in on a little secret. Private equity, some pretty sophisticated, buyers and sellers of businesses would never, ever sell a business without using the services of an investment banker. And if the most sophisticated business people on the planet use investment bankers, shouldn't you have an advisor or an investment banker to help you through the process of finding the right buyer for your business?
You mentioned real estate, and I know you advise people to keep real estate separate from their business. What's the reason behind that?
When you're looking at a strategic buyer, so a company that's buying a bunch of small companies and rolling them up, there's somebody rolling up every industry, dental practices, dry cleaners, veterinarians, whatever the case may be. When you're dealing with a financial buyer, a private equity firm, or a sophisticated firm, real estate it poses a couple of different issues and problems. One, it's a different asset class. So I may love your business, and you know what? The average strategic or financial buyer may look at 100 teasers, 30 confidential information memorandums, and maybe they buy one company. There's a lot of hurdles to get to a successful transaction. Real estate, different asset class, opens up. Now it's another hurdle. Not only do I have to like the company, I got to now like the real estate. Different asset class, different maturities, different investment cycle, and a different set of potential trailing liabilities. So in general, no one in the buyer universe today wants to own the real estate. Best for an entrepreneur to spin it out, separate entity, put in place a fair market lease with their company, and it's reflected in the financial statements. No adjustments need to be made later. And then as long as there's a fair market lease in place of a market term to duration, call it 5 to 7 years, fair market rent, most people who buy your business are going to continue on because moving's a hassle, and they're going to continue on with that lease. And so now you have a second income stream, which is coming from the real estate. So it's primarily the different asset class and the different investment cycle and the trailing liabilities that really create hassles for entrepreneurs who haven't spun out the real estate. They haven't been charging a fair rent, and now they're ready to sell. And someone's trying to separate these assets. Well, I want this. I don't want that. Now you have to hurry up, get this thing spun out. And you know what? There can be tax ramifications depending on how it was bought, what type of property it is. And so again, another reason to be doing this kind of stuff a couple of years before you're getting ready to sell.
And that makes sense. And it also, from a liability standpoint, it has advantages that you're separating it from your business, and it creates another asset class for you.
I like in my books to use a lot of real life examples. And I ran, one of the companies that I ran and built was a family owned and operated business that had been in business for over 50 years by the time they hired me. And over that course of the 50 years, they had amassed hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate. And they did spin it out, and they not only put in place fair market leases with the company that then continued for several years, but now they have another empire, which is the real estate empire that they actively still manage today. And it became kind of a pivot for them to go from the business I was running that we sold to now being real estate entrepreneurs and commercial property owners.
Multiple streams of income.
Absolutely.
Gotta love it. Buyers don't like risk. What are the risks that they're evaluating when they look at businesses?
For most small businesses, the owner, the founder is the biggest risk. So here's what I mean by that. I'm buying a business. It's founder owned and operated. In my particular industry I'm working in today, it's never very sexy, but It's HVAC and refrigeration. I'm running one of the largest refrigeration service companies in the country. And so 4,500 very small businesses out there that look like ours, but they're, founder owned and operated. In our industry, as is typical in industrial type service businesses, you can have a contract that says 3 years duration, but there's always a 30-day out clause. If the customer isn't satisfied within 30 days, they can cancel, they can leave you. And so I'm really not buying employees and trucks and contracts. What I'm really buying are relationships built by an entrepreneur across decades. And the entrepreneur who builds a business oftentimes is germane to the continued success of the business. And so I'm always seeking for an avenue to keep that entrepreneur connected to ensure my success in buying the business and making it a part of whatever empire I'm building. So oftentimes we'll use rollover investments so that we're aligned financially. I'm looking for entrepreneurs who seek to stay engaged. And for those who wish to retire, I'm looking for, do they have a number two? Can I maintain a relationship with the entrepreneur through a consulting agreement? Because what I'm buying is relationships, and they're so key to the success of the business that if they walk out the door, there's a chance all the employees are going to leave, all the customers are going to leave, and I'm going to be left holding the bag with essentially no assets left after the deal closes. So entrepreneurs need to be very thoughtful about, if they exit the business, is there a succession plan in place? Is there a number two, someone who could step up? Are they willing to be a rollover investor, stay invested in the business, even though they're no longer the sole owner of that business? Are they going to stay active? And if they're pulling back, are they willing to, at least entertain a consulting arrangement so that the expertise that's built inside their head across decades is still available to the buyer? So those are some of the kind of themes that I run into, especially with small founder-owned businesses where they are the key employee, and the key to everything in the business.
And that's why it's important for them to figure out how to get out of the business and to create systems so that they are not the bottleneck in their business either, and that others can handle stuff. Not everyone is looking at them to solve every single problem, because that makes for a very hectic schedule.
Absolutely. And I joke with people all the time, the hardest thing for me to do when I'm building a business is to get out, because each subsequent investor wants to see me stay invested, stay at the helm, helping to run and build the empire. So the private equity guys are coming and going every 5 years or so, and 13 years later, I wake up, I'm on my third set of shareholders, and I'm still tied to a business. So you really have to be thoughtful about making sure that it's not just you that is the business. It may be you who founded and created it, but there is a process that's consistent in place. There's leadership in place that can continue on into the future, the business that you eventually want to walk away from.
So true. At the end of the day, when people are buying businesses, they're buying earnings. How do you look at the quality of earnings, and what are the factors that you're evaluating? So,
most entrepreneurs don't know what the term Ebitda is or what it means. And they also, if you're an entrepreneur and you're started a business and you're successful, your goal and objective is don't pay taxes. Your goal and objective is, okay, everything's a business expense. I'm going to generate zero profit on whatever revenue I've got, because that's my game that I'm playing. And a part of building this team of advisors is to help you kind of pull out those and normalize the financials that are being reported, so that you can present 3 years worth of financial statements that are clean, that are more reflective of the true business. All of those weird expenses have been pulled out. Now you may still do this because your goal is still, until you sell it, don't pay taxes, but someone's got to help you get the books in order to present to a buyer to say, hey, here are the expenses that go away with me and no longer continue on with the business. Here's my adjusted earnings. And what all buyers seek to do with a business they're looking at is something that's called a quality of earnings. So you touched on that. That is where accountants have gone in and have blessed and said, yes, these 3 years worth of financial statements are accurate and they're reflective of this level of earnings. It's a quality of earnings. And it normalizes all of these strange transactions that have been taking place, and the lake house, the airplane, all those expenses, et cetera. And then a buyer can truly take a look at and understand, okay, this industry typically trades at this multiple of earnings. Here's what the earnings are. And so, here's kind of a valuation range. And I always tell entrepreneurs, never wait for a buyer to present you with their own quality of earnings report and what your business is worth. You should have already done a sell side quality of earnings. Part of building that team, part of working with these advisors is to understand what your business is producing and what it's worth before you go seek out, a perfect buyer for the business. And so the more educated you can become as a seller, to our earlier conversation, generally the more prepared you are, the better business you're running leading up to the sale, and the more you're going to maximize the potential outcome of a transaction when selling it, because you've become a very sophisticated seller.
So what I find is that people spend too much money. And if the business owner is stuffing his business with all these other expenses, more often than not, they've got no clarity on what their overhead is. They've got no clarity on where the money's going. And then they're always wondering why I don't have money. It's because, you spent it on this and that. That's not part of the business. And so I try and help them. I agree with, hey, let's pay as little taxes as possible, but let's always run our business with clarity. And I will have them run their personal business expenses through separate channels in the company so that it's very clear how the company is truly doing. And then you see what you're truly benefiting from the company. And that makes it a lot easier just from the day-to-day of operations too. And it lets them feel better to know that they are actually profitable, even though they can't see it in their books.
Sure. And so that's a good segue to EBITDA. Many entrepreneurs are not familiar with the term, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's kind of a level playing field where buyers in the buyer universe are looking at and analyzing a company, because, let's take two entrepreneurs side by side. One is investing for the future, opening up new offices, buying new vehicles, trucks, plants, whatever the widgets are they're producing. They're truly investing. And so they have very little cash profit. Another entrepreneur, has been riding on, call it investments made 20 years ago, isn't buying new vehicles, isn't opening up new facilities and new places. They don't have all of the expense that relates to growth, and they have a high cash earnings. Which business would you rather own? The one with higher cash earnings, or the one that's been investing in itself and doing the things it should do for growth and for the future? And most buyers, in order to neutralize kind of those variations, go up to a line on the financial statement called Ebitda. And there, before you've made all those investments, is kind of a truer picture of what the cash generation potential is, free cash flow generation potential is of a business. And it's generally at that line where a small private company, when it's sold, is valued from, is some multiple of that measurement known as Ebitda. And so I talk about that in both my books. What is it? What's adjusted, pro forma, blah, blah, blah. And it's always good for an entrepreneur to start getting tuned into, kind of the nuances that the buyer universe is going to be looking at. So when they're for sale, they have a very good understanding of what kind of cash are they generating? What are their expenses? Are they on a growth trajectory? And what should that typical multiple of Ebitda be for them, so they can recognize when is it a good deal? How do you know you're getting a good price? And so the more you understand as a seller, the better off you're going to be. When we sell a car or trade in a car, we jump on Kelley Blue Book or someplace and we put in all our VIN number and the options, and hey, I should be able to get this much as a trade in. And so we educate ourselves. And when we're buying or selling a business, we need to educate ourselves too, so that we make sure we're getting good value for that business when we're leaving.
And that's very true. And understanding your free cash flow is an important number to know, just so that you know how you can fund future growth and what's going on in the business. And I find for a lot of business owners, forecasting cash flow is a very difficult thing for them. And so wrapping your hands around that, I think, is important. And kind of even going through this whole process is important because it shows you what you don't know, right? It gives you, kind of turns on the lights to say, hey, you've been missing all of this stuff in your business. Take a look at this, take a look at this, and take a look at that. Regardless of whether you sell, it helps you to improve yourself.
An entrepreneur once told me, we're all sellers. The question is just when and how. And are we still alive, or did our heirs sell it for us after we were gone? But at some point, we are all sellers of a business that we own. So it's really important to understand all of the subtle nuances about that business, so that whenever we're a seller, we're prepared and we get maximum value.
Any parting thoughts on anything we should have covered but didn't today?
I think for all the successful entrepreneurs out there who are building businesses, God bless you. You're the backbone of the world. And it's really small business where majority of wealth is created. There aren't Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk's on every corner of the planet. It's the what keeps our country ticking here in the U.S. is small business. And so I would say owning a business, being successful, is really just a license to learn more. It's not a destination. You should constantly be challenging your own status quo, be thinking about how you could do things better tomorrow, and educating yourself so that you're always being prepared for a future that you may not see coming. I mean, think of COVID, think of the Great Recession back in 08, 09. It's like, I've seen multiple times now in my adult business career where companies completely, their world was turned upside down and changed on a dime. And we have to be prepared for those things. And so the better we know our business, the more we're engaged in learning every day, the better we'll be as entrepreneurs, and the better businesses that we'll run. And ultimately, the more value we'll get when we sell. So never stop learning, never stop challenging yourself. If you get to a point to where it's no longer fun to get up in the morning, boy, it's probably time to sell that business. We also got to love and have passion for the things that we do. And I'm never passionate about what my companies do. I'm passionate about the people in them who make it happen. So, find your passion, keep learning. That's probably my biggest advice.
Very reasonable advice. If people would like to learn more about you and your books, what's the best way for them to do that?
So Adam Coffey, Coffey, you can find me online at adamecoffey.com or on LinkedIn. I love hearing from readers of my books. I get messages and outreach from people all over the globe. It's been a lot of fun. And I'm happy to engage and answer questions for people that are out there. It's a fun part of what I do. So that's it. Not hard to find. And I actually do respond. So as long as you're not trying to sell me something, stop on by, say hello. If you got a question, I'm happy to answer it for you. Again, really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. Thank you for having me, and good luck to everybody out there who's listening.
And thank you so much for joining us today.
Take care now.
Having an exit planner evaluate your company will help you to see what you don't know and show you how others think about your business. It's an eye-opening process to have someone take a look at you this way. It will also help you to improve. Many times I hear stories of business owners who do this because they're tired. And once they do, they come to love their business again because they fixed it. It's fun now. It doesn't make them tired anymore. Let's make your business fun. Remember, you don't need more resources. You need to be more resourceful. We focus on the bottom line. If you want a done-for-you service, you can have me as your Chief Profitability Officer. Because you have your zone of genius and want to spend your time doing what you love. I only work with a handful of clients, so they get my full attention. I work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $5 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on my calendar for a good fit conversation to see if I'm the right person to support you and how I can help you. If you want to learn about living the life of your dreams, check out my other podcast, Richer Soul. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.